Mother, use your own money. Don't use my life as collateral. Then watch the home your father left us disappear. You're saving the home your father built for us. But mother, what if saving this house means losing my own life? Kato, what are you doing?
Stop.
I cannot marry her. What did you just say?
Nabirye walked down the aisle toward millionaire Kato Ssentongo, believing she has sacrificed love to save her family. But just before the vows, Kato suddenly raised his hand. Stop. I cannot marry her. Before you discover why, tell us which city you're watching from in the comments. Nabirye Achen stood beneath the warm pendant lights of her family's glass-walled living room in Millionaire, Kampala, staring at a folder she had never seen before. The villa around her looked exactly as it always had: polished stone floors, cream linen sofas, carved Ugandan wood panels, and enormous windows opening toward the scattered lights across the hills. A bronze sculpture her father had bought from a local artist still stood near the staircase. Fresh lilies rested on the dining table. Nothing about the room suggested crisis. That was what frightened her most. Her mother, Florence Achen, sat at the far end of the long walnut table, wearing an elegant emerald kitenge dress with structured sleeves and a narrow gold necklace. Even under pressure, Florence believed presentation mattered. Her posture remained straight, her lipstick immaculate, her expression composed. Only her hands betrayed her. They were locked tightly around a silver pen. "Open it," Florence said. Nabirye did not move. "You called me away from a client presentation and refused to tell me why. You can at least tell me what I'm looking at. Open the folder." Nabirye pulled out the first document. She read the bank's name, then the property description, then the address, her address. She looked up. Why is this house listed as security? Florence's gaze shifted toward the windows. "Mother, it was necessary. For what? To stabilize the company." Nabirye slowly lowered the paper. A sharp pressure formed behind her ribs. Achen Heritage Interiors had been founded by her father, Solomon Achen, long before Nabirye became an interior architect herself. The company supplied furniture, fittings, and decorative pieces to hotels, office developments, and private residences across Kampala. After Solomon's death, Florence had taken control. She had always spoken confidently about new contracts, potential partnerships, and expansion. Nabirye had believed her. "How much did you borrow?" Florence hesitated. "That isn't the important question. It is when our home is attached to the answer." "Nabirye, how much?" Florence finally pushed another page across the table. Nabirye read the figure twice, her stomach tight. "This cannot be right." "It is. You borrowed against the house for the company?" "I borrowed against an asset to protect another asset. This isn't an asset to me." Florence's face hardened slightly. "I know what this house means." "Do you?" Nabirye walked away from the table, pressing the heel of her hand against her forehead. Her father had designed the first sketches for the villa himself, not because he was an architect. He simply knew what he wanted: a courtyard where Florence could grow herbs, a wide kitchen because he believed every serious family conversation eventually moved toward food, a balcony facing the Kampala hills, and a small study for Nabirye because even before she had chosen architecture, he used to tell people that his daughter would build beautiful things. The house was not perfect. It was memory made physical. Florence rose. "The business has been under pressure." "For how long?" "Long enough. And you never thought I deserved to know. You had your own career. That is not an answer. I was protecting you." Nabirye laughed once without humor. "By risking the house without telling me?" Florence's voice dropped. "By carrying the burden myself until I could no longer carry it." That stopped Nabirye. For the first time, she noticed how exhausted her mother looked beneath the careful makeup. But sympathy did not erase the document in her hand. "What happens now?" Florence took a measured breath. "The bank will not wait indefinitely. So we sell something." "It isn't that. We reduce the company." Florence's jaw tightened. "No. Then we sell one of the commercial properties. They are tied to existing facilities. Then we bring in an investor." "We are." Something about the answer made Nabirye turn. Florence walked to the sideboard and poured water into a crystal glass. though she did not drink it. There is a development group interested in Achen heritage interiors. Nabirye waited. Florence continued. Ssentongo Urban Holdings. The name was familiar. Anyone working in Kampala's premium property sector knew it. Boutique residences, commercial developments, luxury hospitality projects. And at the center of the company was Kato Ssentongo. Nabirye had seen him at industry events but had never spoken to him beyond polite introductions. He wants to invest? His group is considering a strategic partnership. Good. Florence remained silent. Nabirye's relief vanished. What aren't you telling me? The Ssentongo family believes a closer relationship between the families would give the partnership greater stability. Nabirye stared at her. What does that mean? Florence placed the glass down. You know exactly what it means. For several seconds, neither woman moved. Then Nabirye shook her head slowly. No, you have not even heard the proposal. I don't need to. Nabirye, noble Florence stepped toward her. Kato Ssentongo is educated, respected, financially secure, and comes from a family we have known socially for years. Then marry him yourself. Florence's expression changed. Do not speak to me like that. Then don't speak about my marriage like you're negotiating upholstery. I am trying to save this family, and apparently my life has become one of the assets. That is unfair, is it? Florence looked wounded, but Nabirye was too angry to soften. So what happened? Nabirye asked. They invest, the bank steps back, and I stand beside Kato looking grateful? No one is selling you. Then tell me I can refuse without consequences. Florence said nothing. That silence answered everything. Nabirye looked toward the staircase. On a small console beneath an old photograph of her father rested a brass key, the original front door key. It had not been used in years since the villa's security system had been modernized, but Nabirye had kept it because her father once placed it in her palm and told her that her home was supposed to protect the choices made inside it. She crossed the room and picked it up. Its familiar weight rested against her fingers. Florence followed her gaze. Your father built this home with everything he had, and now you want me to repay him with everything I have. That is not what I said. It is exactly what you are asking. Florence's composure finally cracked. What would you have me do? She demanded. Watch the bank take the house? Close the company your father spent most of his adult life building? Tell employees who have worked with us for years that sentiment does not pay salaries? Nabirye turned back. Maybe you should have told me before it reached this point. I was ashamed. The confession landed differently from everything else Florence had said. Her mother looked away. I thought I could fix it. For a moment, Nabirye saw not the commanding woman who had managed family dinners, business meetings, funerals, contracts, and appearances with equal discipline. She saw a widow terrified of losing the last visible proof of the life she had built with her husband. Nabirye's anger weakened, but it did not disappear. Florence returned to the table and opened another folder. There will be a dinner. Nabirye's eyes narrowed. With whom? Kato, no, me him once. I love someone else. Florence closed her eyes briefly. Tendo cannot solve this. He was never supposed to. Love does not make death disappear. Neither does marriage. Florence pushed the folder toward her. You are 31 years old, Nabirye. I am not ordering you to do anything. I am asking you to understand what is at stake. Nabirye looked at the papers, then at the house, then at the brass key in her palm. She had designed luxury spaces for clients who believed beautiful homes proved successful lives. Standing inside her own beautiful home, she suddenly understood how easily walls could hide financial fear, family pride, and decisions nobody wanted to admit they had made. She placed the key on top of the bank documents. I'll meet him. Florence exhaled. But listen carefully, Nabirye added. Her mother looked up. I am agreeing to a conversation, not a marriage. Florence gave a small nod. Nabirye picked up her handbag and moved toward the door. Behind her, the villa remained immaculate. Every lamp glowed, every cushion sat perfectly in place. Every expensive surface reflected the appearance of security. But as Nabirye stepped outside, she understood something she had never considered before. A family could lose a home long before anyone came to take the keys. Nabirye Achen stepped on the rooftop terrace of one of Kampala's most refined restaurants and immediately understood why her mother had chosen this place. Everything was designed to make wealth feel effortless. Low amber lights glowed beneath polished stone tables. Tall planters softened the glass railing, while the hills of Kampala stretched beyond it in layers of illuminated buildings and dark green slopes. The music was quiet enough for private conversation, and the servers moved with the practiced discretion of people accustomed to guests who discussed expensive decisions over dinner. Nabirye had dressed for herself rather than for Florence. Her cobalt blue dress combined a clean contemporary silhouette with narrow panels of Ugandan-inspired print along the sleeves. She wore gold earrings, low heels, and her natural hair swept into an elegant braided bun. She had refused the cream dress her mother suggested. It was a small rebellion. Tonight, she needed one. Nabirye? She turned. Kato Ssentongo was standing beside a table near the terrace railing. He was taller than she remembered from industry events, dressed in a charcoal suit without a tie. There was no extravagant watch displayed beneath his cuff. No unnecessary entourage, no performance of importance. He simply pulled out the chair opposite him. "Thank you for coming." My mother made declining surprisingly complicated. A faint smile crossed his face. "My father has the same talent." That was not the response she had expected. Nabirye sat. Kato took the chair opposite her rather than beside her. A server approached, but Kato did not order for her. "Would you like something?" "Sparkling water." He requested the same. Nabirye watched him carefully. "You can stop trying to impress me." Kato raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware I had started. This restaurant, I thought somewhere quiet would be useful." The view that came with the table. Despite herself, Nabirye almost smiled. Almost. She folded her hands. "Let's make this easier. I don't want to marry you." Kato leaned back slightly. "Good." She blinked. "Good? Yes. That is either the shortest rejection I have ever received or the strangest marriage negotiation in Kampala. I'm hoping it is neither." Their water arrived. Kato waited until the server moved away before continuing. "I don't need a wife to complete a business acquisition, Nabirye." The sentence changed the atmosphere immediately. She studied him. "Then, why are we here?" "Because our families have decided that combining a commercial partnership with a marriage would make everyone feel more secure." Everyone except the people getting married, apparently. Nabirye reached for her glass. "My mother made it sound as if your family had expectations." "They do. And you don't?" "I have expectations of a business transaction. Marriage is a different matter." "Your father knows you feel that way." "He knows I dislike mixing personal obligations with commercial ones." That wasn't my question. "No," Kato said calmly. "He does not know the full extent of my objection." At least he was honest. Nabir looked across the terrace. A couple at another table laughed over dessert. Nearby, two women in elegant dresses were discussing what sounded like a property launch. Everything around her suggested adulthood functioning exactly as advertised. Careers, money, polished conversation, controlled choices. Yet, you're sitting opposite a man discussing whether their families should merge their lives like companies. "My mother mortgaged our house," she said. Kato's expression became more serious. "I know." Nabirye looked back sharply. "How?" Ssentongo Urban Holdings received preliminary financial documents from Achen Heritage Interiors. "So you have seen our finances?" "Only what was submitted for the proposed partnership." "Which means you know more about my family's problems than I did until recently." I suspected that might be the case. Something about his tone irritated her. "You suspected?" "The documents suggested the decisions had been made under considerable pressure. And you still agreed to this dinner." "I agreed to meet you." "There is a difference?" "A significant one." Nabirye leaned forward, then explained it. Kato rested one hand beside his glass. "Our company is developing a boutique hospitality project. Your family's business has rich relationships with local craftsmen, suppliers, furniture workshops, and textile producers that would take us years to build independently. A commercial partnership makes sense, and marriage does not appear anywhere in my investment model." That earned him a genuine smile, brief but real. Kato noticed it. So you can smile. Don't become ambitious. He laughed quietly. For the first time since entering the restaurant, Nabirye's shoulders relaxed. Then she remembered Tendo. The guilt returned immediately. Kato seemed to notice the change. There is someone else. It was not phrased as a question. Nabirye stared at him. My mother told you. No, then how do you know? You have looked uncomfortable whenever marriage is mentioned. But when we discuss the company, you become angry. Those are different emotions. She considered that. You observe people for a living, buildings mostly. People are more difficult. Tendo Mugewa, she said. Kato waited. He is a landscape architect. We have been together for nearly 3 years. Does your family approve? My father would have. And your mother? She likes Tendo. She just likes financial security more. Kato looked toward the city. That is often how fear disguises itself. Nabirye frowned. What does that mean? My father does something similar. He calls fear strategy because strategy sounds more respectable. That was the first moment Nabirye saw something beneath Kato's composure. Not resentment exactly. Recognition. Why does your family want this so badly? Kato paused. My father built Ssentongo Urban Holdings from a small property operation into something people now describe as an institution. Institutions become obsessed with continuity. So I'm continuity? Your family name has credibility in Kampala's design and hospitality circles. Your father built relationships that cannot simply be purchased. My father believes joining the families would create trust around the partnership. And what do you believe? That trust built through coercion is usually expensive. Nabirye went silent. That sentence stayed between them. Dinner arrived, though neither seemed particularly interested in eating. Nabirye finally said, my mother believes losing the company would mean losing my father all over again. Kato nodded. And you? I don't know anymore. She looked down at her plate. I grew up watching my father build things, furniture workshops, hotel interiors, this house, relationships. He made everything feel permanent. Nothing business is permanent. That sounds very comforting. It wasn't intended to. She gave him a dry look. Kato continued. Sometimes preserving a legacy means changing it before it destroys itself. Nabirye slowly put down her fork. Have you seen something in the accounts? Not enough to make a responsible judgment. But something concerned you. Yes. Her pulse quickened. What? Your family company has revenue. It has recognizable clients. It has assets. Yet the borrowing pattern suggests cash flow pressure that does not match the public image. Nabirye felt embarrassed even though she had done nothing wrong. Kato seemed to understand. This is not a criticism of you. It still feels like you are describing my family undressing behind glass. Then I apologize. She studied him. You apologize quickly for a millionaire. And you insult millionaires frequently for an architect. I work for them. I have data. He laughed again. This time Nabirye did too. Then her expression softened. What would you do? If it were my company, yes, I would want the complete numbers before deciding what deserves to be saved. My mother would say everything deserves to be saved. Then your mother is thinking like a widow, not a managing director. The words were blunt. Nabirye stiffened. Kato immediately raised a hand. That sounded cruel. It did. I'm sorry. She looked away. But after several seconds, she said quietly, it may also be true. Kato did not press the point. Instead, he reached into the slim leather case beside his chair and removed a folder. Nabirye stared at it. Please tell me that isn't a marriage contract. It would make this dinner considerably worse. What is it? A list of the financial documents my team would normally request before evaluating a company like yours. He slid it across the table. Nabirye did not touch it. Why give this to me? Because if your home is being used as security, you should understand exactly what is threatening it. My mother won't like that. I'm not asking your mother. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass railing. Nabirye looked at the folder, then at Kato. All evening she had prepared herself to defend her freedom from an arrogant rich man. Instead, the man her family wanted her to marry had just offered her something nobody else had. Information. Suppose the numbers are worse than I think, then you make decisions based on truth. And suppose saving the company requires the marriage? Kato's expression became still. Then someone has designed a very bad business deal. Nabirye held his gaze. He pushed the folder a little closer. Read everything before you promise anyone anything. She finally picked it up. For the first time since Florence had shown her the bank documents, Nabirye felt something other than fear. Not relief, not hope, control. And as she looked across the table at the millionaire her family had chosen for her, she realized the most dangerous part of the situation might not be that Kato Ssentongo was a terrible man. It might be that he was reasonable enough to make an unreasonable choice begin to look possible. Nabirye Achen found Tendo Mugewa standing beside a drafting table in his landscape studio, surrounded by rolled plans, material samples, and miniature trees from a model he was preparing for a residential project outside Kampala. He looked up when she entered. You met him. It was not a question. Nabirye placed her handbag on a chair. Yes? Tendo removed his glasses. And? He isn't what I expected. A shadow crossed his face. That sounds dangerously close to a compliment. Tendo, I'm listening. She told him about the rooftop dinner, the proposed business partnership, and the financial documents Kato had given her. She explained that Achen Heritage Interiors might be in deeper trouble than Florence had admitted. Tendo remained silent until she finished. Then he asked, and the marriage? I told him I don't want it. Good, but that doesn't solve the debt. Tendo turned away. There it was. The sentence neither of them wanted to touch. Nabirye walked closer. My mother could lose the house. I know she could lose the company too. I know that. Then why are you acting like this is simple? Tendo faced her. Because you keep talking as if there are only two doors. Marry Kato or destroy your family. That may be what it comes down to. No, that is what frightened people tell you when they need your sacrifice to look inevitable. Nabirye's eyes stiffened. You think my mother is manipulating me? I think your mother is terrified. That isn't the same thing. It can become the same thing. She folded her arms. Tendo exhaled and softened his voice. Nabirye, I'm not attacking Florence. I'm asking what happens after this crisis. What do you mean? If I somehow found enough money to save that house, would your family finally stop deciding what you owe them? The question landed harder than she expected. She looked away. Tendo continued. What happens when the company needs another rescue? What happens when your mother refuses to close an unprofitable division because your father created it? What happens when somebody's you owe them another sacrifice because you made the first one? You're making assumptions. So are they. He moved closer to her. You are not a line of credit, Nabirye. Her eyes burned. You think I don't know that? I think you know it professionally. I'm not sure you believe it when it comes to your family. Silence filled the studio. Through the large windows, Kampala's lights shimmered beyond neighboring buildings. Nabirye looked at the architectural models around them. Tendo had built his practice slowly. No family fortune, no prestigious surname opening doors. Every project represented a client he had convinced, a proposal he had revised, a payment he had waited for. She loved that about him. But tonight, his independence made her feel judged. You can say all this because it isn't your father's house. Tendo flinched. The moment the words left her mouth, Nabirye regretted them. That was unfair. Yes, he said. It was. I'm sorry. Tendo nodded but did not pretend the apology erased it. Nabirye sat on the edge of his work table. I keep seeing my father everywhere in that house. The study, the staircase, that ridiculous bronze sculpture he loved. The one you said looked like a dancing goat. It still does. Tendo almost smiled. Nabirye's voice weakened. If the bank takes that house, it feels like losing him again. Tendo came closer. I understand. Do you? More than you think. He took her hand. But loving someone who is gone cannot require destroying the life of someone who is still here. Nabirye looked at him. What if Kato's investment really can fix everything? Then let him invest. And if his family refuses without the marriage? Tendo released her hand. Then you have her answer about what kind of deal it is. Nabirye stood. You make it sound so easy to walk away. I never said it would be easy. What would you have me do? Watch my mother lose everything while I protect my principles. I want you to stop calling yourself the only solution. The words cut through her anger. Tendo picked up one of the rolled plans and set it aside, more to occupy his hands than because it needed moving. I love you, Nabirye, but I cannot spend my life competing with every emergency your family creates. She stared at him. So that's it? No, it sounds like it. I'm telling you the truth before resentment turns me into someone neither of us recognizes. Nabirye swallowed. And if I agree to marry Kato? Tendo's face changed. He did not shout. That somehow hurt more. I won't wait in the shadows while you build a marriage with another man. It wouldn't be about love. Marriage has consequences even when love isn't involved. I would be doing it for my family, and I would still be losing you. Nabirye felt tears gather but refused to let them fall. Tendo, he shook his head. I will not ask you to choose me. If you stay with me because I begged, then I become another person deciding your life for you. She stared at the man she loved and suddenly hated how reasonable he sounded. Then what are you asking? For you to choose something because you believe in it, not because your mother is afraid, not because Kato is rich, not because I love you. He paused. Because you choose it. Later, back at the Muyenga villa, Nabirye found Florence waiting beside a cream envelope. In it was a formal proposal from the Ssentongo family. The commercial partnership would stabilize Achen Heritage Interiors and give Florence room to negotiate with the bank. But the language surrounding the families was unmistakable. Florence watched her daughter. You met Kato. Yes, and he is decent. Relief appeared on Florence's face. Nabirye hated that relief. She thought of Tendo, she thought of her father, she thought of the brass key upstairs. Then she looked at the financial papers spread across the table. If I agree, Nabirye said quietly, the house is protected? Florence hesitated. The partnership would give us a real chance. That was not a guarantee. Nabirye knew it, but fear rarely waited for guarantees. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, Florence was still watching. I'll accept the engagement. Her mother covered her mouth. Nabirye, don't thank me. Florence fell size. Nabirye picked up the envelope. This is not a love story, mother. She walked toward the staircase before Florence could answer. And with every step, Nabirye wondered whether she had just saved her family's home or simply agreed to become the most expensive thing inside it. Nabirye Achen stood on a raised platform inside an elegant bridal atelier in Kampala, while 3 mirrors reflected a woman she barely recognized. The gown was exquisite. Ivory silk fell cleanly from her shoulders, while subtle embroidery inspired by traditional Ugandan patterns traced the fitted bodies. The designer had added a detachable overskirt that moved like water when Nabirye turned. Gold earrings framed her face, and her braided hair had been arranged into a polished crown. Florence stood several steps away in a vibrant marigold kitenge dress, one hand pressed to her chest. My goodness, she whispered. Your father would have cried. Nabirye looked at herself in the mirror. That sentence should have made her emotional. Instead, it made the dress feel heavier. A stylist adjusted the fabric around her waist. Comfortable? Yes, Nabirye replied. It was a lie. Everything since the engagement had become beautifully organized. Florists sent mood boards filled with white orchids, tropical greenery, and gold accents. Caterers prepared tasting menus. A luxury venue near Lake Victoria had been reserved. Invitations were printed on thick cream paper. People congratulated her everywhere. Clients, family friends, former classmates. Women she barely remembered embraced her and said she was fortunate, fortunate. The word followed her like perfume. You are very quiet, Florence said. I'm wearing half a room in fabric. The designer laughed politely. Florence did not. When the stylist stepped away, Nabirye carefully descended from the platform. Her mother approached with a velvet box. I brought something. If it's another bracelet, please don't. It isn't. Florence opened the box. Inside lay the old brass key from the Muyenga villa. Nabirye froze. You took this from the console? I thought you should carry something of your father with you. Nabirye touched the key. Its surface had darkened with age, but she recognized every scratch. Florence smiled sadly. He gave you that key because he always said the house would belong to the family long after we were gone. Nabirye closed her fingers around it. You saved his home. The words struck deeper than Florence intended. Nabirye looked up. Did I? Her mother frowned. What do you mean? The partnership isn't finalized. It will be. And the bank? Discussions are progressing. That isn't what I asked. Florence lowered her voice. Nabirye, this is not the place. Interesting. Everyone keeps choosing places where I'm not supposed to ask questions. The designer quietly moved toward the other side of the atelier. Florence's expression tightened. You agreed to the engagement. Yes. You met Kato. You said he was a decent man. He is. Then what exactly are you fighting now? Nabirye stared at her reflection again. That's the problem. Florence waited. He's decent enough that everyone thinks I should be grateful. You should be grateful to have options. An option I'm afraid to refuse is not really an option. Florence's shoulders dropped. I thought we had moved past this. No, we dressed it beautifully. The sentence silenced the room. Nabirye looked down at the key. My entire life, Daddy told me a home should make you feel safe enough to become yourself. Florence's eyes softened. He loved you very much. I know. Then why are you speaking as though preserving what he built is some kind of punishment? Because I'm beginning to wonder whether we are preserving what he built or preserving our fear of letting anything change. Florence flinched. That company fed this family, I know. It educated you, I know. It employed people who trusted your father. I know, Mother. Florence stepped closer. Then understand why I cannot simply dismantle it. Nabirye's voice softened. I understand why you don't want to. That is the same thing. No, Nabirye shook her head. It isn't. Her mother looked away. A phone on the fitting table vibrated. Florence ignored it. Nabirye stepped back onto the platform and stared at the woman in the mirrors. The bride looked composed, successful, privileged. Her dress probably cost more than some people earned in months. And yet Nabirye had never felt less powerful. The atelier door opened. Kato entered carrying a garment bag over one shoulder, clearly surprised to see Nabirye still there. Florence brightened immediately. Kato, I was told my fitting was in the adjoining room. It is, Florence said. Come, look at her. Nabirye nearly closed her eyes. Kato did not react the way Florence wanted. He looked at Nabirye's face before he looked at the dress. You look uncomfortable. Florence's smile vanished. Nabirye almost laughed. Thank you. That is exactly what every bride hopes to hear. I meant emotionally. I know, Florence intervened. She is overwhelmed. Weddings are overwhelming. Kato nodded slowly. Perhaps? Florence excused herself to speak with the designer. Kato remained near the platform. You still have the documents I gave you? Yes. Have you reviewed them? Some. And Nabirye glanced toward her mother. There are gaps, I noticed. Why hasn't your company asked for more information? We have. Nabirye turned sharply. And some requests have taken longer than they should. A cold sensation moved through her. What does that mean? It means I don't want you assuming this marriage guarantees anything financially. She stared at him. My mother thinks it does. I know. Did you tell her otherwise? Yes. And she still. Nabirye stopped herself. Kato lowered his voice. Do not make a permanent decision based on a temporary crisis. She looked at him. You say that very easily for the man standing on the safe side of the crisis. That is fair. He did not defend himself. That made her anger harder to hold. Nabirye opened her palm. The brass key lay there. Kato looked at it. My father gave me this. To the house? Yes, she swallowed. Everyone keeps saying I'm saving it. Kato remained quiet. Nabirye looked at herself in the mirror once more. The gown shimmered beneath the atelier lights. Florence was discussing alterations in the background. The entire room was preparing Nabirye for a future everyone seemed able to celebrate except her. She closed her fingers around the key. Then she asked the question that had been growing inside her since the bank documents appeared. If I'm the one saving everyone else, Kato, her voice dropped. Who exactly is saving me? Kato Ssentongo stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Kampala office, while Zawed Namutibi arranged 3 financial reports across the conference table. Outside, the city looked prosperous beneath the clear morning light. Inside, the mood was considerably less attractive. Zowede was 37, sharply dressed in a burnt orange tailored suit over a patterned silk blouse. She had spent more than a decade restructuring companies that appeared successful from the outside while quietly bleeding cash underneath. Kato trusted her because she was unimpressed by appearances. Well, he asked. Zoed tapped the first report. Achen Heritage Interiors is not insolvent. Kato turned. That sounds like good news. It would be if someone weren't treating it as though every part of the company must survive. She opened another file. The core interior supply business is still viable. Their relationships with hotels, developers, workshops, and textile suppliers have real commercial value. That matches what I saw, but two divisions are consuming most of the available cash. Kato walked toward the table. Which ones? The custom furniture manufacturing unit and their heritage showroom. He frowned. Solomon Achen established both. Exactly. Zowede slid another page toward him. Florence has been protecting them because they belong to her husband, because she believes closing them would mean dismantling his legacy. Kato stared at the numbers. The pattern became obvious once emotion was removed. Revenue entered, losses swallowed it. More borrowing covered those losses. Then property had been pledged to support the borrowing. The Muyenga house, Kato said. Zowede nodded, unnecessarily. That word changed everything. Kato looked up. Explain. If Florence closes the two loss-making divisions, sells some non-essential equipment, renegotiates supplier terms, and restructures the remaining debt, the house does not need to be sacrificed. And our investment, useful. Necessary. For expansion, yes. For preventing the immediate collapse everyone keeps describing. Zowede shook her head. No. Kato slowly sat down. For several moments he said nothing. He remembered Nabirye standing in the bridal atelier with the brass key in her palm. Who exactly is saving me? He had not been able to answer her. Now he understood why. She doesn't know. Zawed watched him. About the restructuring option? Any of it. Then someone should tell her. Kato looked toward the reports. Did Florence know? Zowede's expression became careful. She was advised that downsizing was an option. When? Before the marriage discussions became serious. Kato's jaw tightened. So she knew the house could potentially be protected without Nabirye marrying me. She knew there were alternatives. That is not quite the same thing. No, Zawed agreed. It isn't. Kato stood again. He disliked easy villains. They made complicated situations emotionally convenient. Florence was not selling her daughter for jewelry or status. She was trying to preserve the company her husband had built. But good intentions did not make every decision honorable. What happens to the employees if we restructure? He asked. Some positions disappear. How many? Enough to make the decision painful. Can we transfer some into the hospitality project? Zowed considered it. Possibly. Your procurement division could absorb several. The design team is strong and the workshop, smaller operation. Made to order rather than maintaining full production capacity. Kato nodded. Build that option. Zowede raised an eyebrow. You realize this weakens the argument for the marriage. There should never have been a financial argument for the marriage, and yet you agreed to the engagement. Kotos looked at her. I agreed because I thought Nabirye understood the transaction and was making an adult choice. And now? Now I think she was handed a fire extinguisher and told the entire house would burn unless she used it. Zawed leaned back. That sounds less like a choice. It does. She closed one folder. What are you going to do? Kato did not answer immediately. On the conference table sat a wedding invitation his assistant had placed among his correspondence. Heavy cream paper, embossed lettering. Two respected families presented as though they were entering a beautiful new chapter. Kato picked it up. How many people know about this restructuring analysis? My team. You. Florence has seen earlier versions of the recommendations. Keep the final version confidential for now. Zawed frowned. I hope you're not planning to bury it. The opposite. He placed the invitation beside the financial reports. I want every assumption verified before anyone makes another decision. Zawed studied him. especially Nabirye, especially her. Kato walked toward the windows again. His father had always taught him that wealth created options, but watching Nabirye had shown him something uncomfortable. Sometimes wealth did not create freedom. Sometimes it simply gave pressure a more elegant vocabulary, a merger, a partnership, a suitable family, a secure future. Beautiful phrases could still conceal an ugly question. What would a woman choose if everyone she loved stopped making her responsible for their survival? Behind him, Zawed gathered the reports. There is something else. Kato turned. If Florence refuses the restructuring, then the company will continue draining cash. And the house, eventually the pressure returns. Kato understood. Marriage could postpone the consequences. It could not repair the behavior creating them. Then we don't rescue the company by pretending nothing has to change. Zawed nodded. That is the first sensible thing anyone has said about this deal. Koto gave her a tired look. Your encouragement is overwhelming. I invoiced separately for encouragement. He almost smiled. Then his gaze returned to the wedding invitation. The ceremony was approaching. Families were celebrating. Florists were decorating. Designers were finishing clothes. And somewhere in Muyenga, Nabirye probably believed she was preparing to exchange her future for the survival of her father's home. Koto placed one hand over the invitation. He finally understood what bothered him most. If Nabirye married him after knowing every available option, that would be her decision. But if she walked toward him, believing her family would collapse unless she did, then her answer had already been chosen for her. And Kato Ssentongo was beginning to realize there was one thing his money should never be allowed to purchase: a frightened woman's yes. Nabirye Achen stepped onto the rear terrace of the Muyenga villa and found Kato Ssentongo waiting beside the glass railing. The garden below was softly illuminated and the distant lights of Kampala shimmered beyond the trees. Inside the villa, garment bags hung from doors, floral samples covered the dining table, and carefully labeled boxes waited to be transported to the wedding venue. Everything was ready, almost everything. You said this couldn't wait, Nabirye said. Kato turned. He wore dark trousers and a navy jacket, but there was none of the polished confidence she usually associated with him. I needed to ask you something. If this is about changing the menu, Florence has officially taken control of that government. Koto did not smile. Nabirye noticed. What happened? He gestured toward one of the terraced chairs. Sit with me. I would rather stand. Fair enough. He remained standing too. For several seconds, neither spoke. Nabirye crossed her arms. Koto, you are making me nervous. I've been reviewing the company. Her expression changed. With Zawed, yes. And there are problems. I already knew that. There are also options. Nabirye studied him. What kind of options? Koto chose his words carefully. Restructuring, downsizing, selling equipment that is no longer generating enough return, renegotiating certain obligations. That sounds painful. It would be, but possible? Yes. Nabirye's arms slowly dropped. A cold suspicion entered her voice. How possible, sir? Kato did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, why are you marrying me? She stared at him. Seriously? Yes. We have discussed this. We have discussed what our families want, and we both agreed the partnership makes sense. The business partnership does. Nabirye turned toward the garden. Kato, please don't suddenly develop a conscience days before everyone arrives at the venue. That is exactly when a conscience becomes useful. She gave him a sharp look. He continued. I need an honest answer. You know the answer. Say it anyway. Nabirye's patience broke. Because my mother could lose the company. Because the house is collateral. Because employees depend on that business. Because my father spent most of his adult life building something everyone expects me to protect. Koto listened without interrupting. And because marrying you makes all of that easier, she finished. Easier, he repeated. Yes, not necessary? Nabirye frowned. What are you trying to tell me? Koto looked toward the house. Through the windows, Florence could be seen moving between boxes with two wedding coordinators, elegant and determined, organizing beauty around a crisis nobody outside the family could see. Then Kato faced Nabirye again. If that house was safe tonight, would you still marry me? The question struck with almost physical force. Nabirye opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Kato waited. That's unfair, she finally said. Why? Because the house isn't safe. Imagine that it is. I don't have the luxury of imagining. Try. Nabirye stepped away. You know what? This is easy for you. Your home isn't attached to a loan. Your mother isn't looking at you like you are the last bridge between her and disaster. That is precisely why I'm asking. She turned. And what answer are you hoping for? The truthful one. Her eyes narrowed. You want me to say I wouldn't marry you? Kato remained silent. Nabirye laughed bitterly. How convenient. There is nothing convenient about this. For you, maybe there is. You stop the marriage and return to your company. I return inside and tell my mother that the solution she has built everything around has disappeared. You are not a solution, Nabirye. Everyone keeps saying that while asking me to solve something. Kato absorbed the accusation. It was deserved. He moved closer, leaving enough distance between them that she never felt cornered. I respect you. Please don't. What? Don't make this beautiful. Her voice softened. Don't tell me you respect me while we both know why I'm standing here. Kato looked at her carefully. Then tell me why. Nabirye swallowed. Because I am tired. The anger left her voice. I am tired of watching my mother pretend she isn't frightened. I'm tired of seeing my father in every room of this house. I'm tired of wondering whether choosing myself makes me selfish. Kato said nothing. And I'm tired of loving Tendo while knowing love cannot write a check large enough to make any of this disappear. There it was. The truth neither of them had spoken directly. Kato's expression did not change with jealousy. Instead, he asked, Do you still love him? Nabirye looked away. Yes. The answer was quiet, but it was immediate. Kato nodded once. Nabirye looked back at him. You knew. I suspected. Does that bother you? It would bother me more if you lied. She wrapped her arms around herself. Tendo walked away because he said I needed to choose for myself. He was right. Wonderful. The two men in my life finally agree on something. Kato almost smiled. Almost. Then his expression became serious again. Nabirye, a marriage can survive many difficult things. Financial pressure, family expectations, career changes. Even periods when love feels quieter than responsibility. He paused. But it should not begin with one person believing she has no acceptable way to say no. Nabirye stared at him. Something in his wording unsettled her. What do you know? Kato's eyes shifted briefly toward the house. I know enough to question whether everyone has been completely honest with you. Everyone, Kato. He stopped himself. He could not give her incomplete financial conclusions before Zowede's analysis was finalized. But he could no longer pretend the wedding was simply another decision. Nabirye stepped closer. Tell me, I will. When I can put facts in front of you, not suspicions, that isn't good enough. I know. She shook her head in frustration and turned toward the doors. Kato spoke before she reached them. Nabirye? She stopped. If there were no debt, no house, no company, no frightened mother, just you and me standing somewhere nobody expected anything from us. She slowly turned. Would you choose me? Silence stretched between them. Nabirye looked at the man she was preparing to marry. Kind, successful, decent. A man many women might freely choose. And that was precisely the problem. She could not blame him for her answer. Finally, Nabirye whispered, No. Kato lowered his eyes for a moment. When he looked up again, there was sadness in his face, but also clarity. Thank you. Nabirye frowned. For what? For finally giving me the one answer nobody else has allowed you to give. She went inside without understanding what he meant. Kato remained alone on the terrace. Beyond the glass doors waited a wedding almost everyone wanted. A beautiful venue, two respected families, a valuable commercial partnership, a bride prepared to sacrifice herself quietly enough that nobody would have to call it sacrifice. Kato looked toward the city. He had spent his career believing that the best deals were the ones in which everyone walked away with something valuable. Now he understood that this deal had been structured differently. Everyone would gain something, except the woman wearing the ring. And for the first time since agreeing to the engagement, Kato knew with absolute certainty that if Nabirye could not freely choose the marriage, then someone else would have to choose to stop it. Nabirye Achen stood beneath an arch of white orchids and deep green foliage beside Lake Victoria, listening to the soft movement of water beyond the glass walls of the wedding pavilion. The venue was breathtaking. Golden light filtered through high windows and settled across cream carpets, polished stone, and rows of elegantly dressed guests. Women wore vivid kitenge gowns in emerald, coral, sapphire, and gold. Men sat in tailored suits with patterned pocket squares and traditional details woven subtly into formal attire. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked perfect. Nabirye felt almost nothing. Her ivory gown moved softly around her as she faced Kato Ssentongo at the altar. The brass key from her father's house rested inside a small pocket sewn discreetly into the dress. Florence sat in the front row. Her eyes were wet with pride. Beside her sat senior members of both families, business associates, property developers, hotel executives, and people who had spent weeks describing the marriage as elegant, sensible, and fortunate. Nabirye looked at Kato. He was composed, too composed. She remembered their conversations on the terrace. Would you choose me? And her answer, no. The officiant spoke about partnership, respect, patience, and the responsibility two adults accepted when choosing to build a life together. Choosing. That word felt almost cruel. Nabirye looked toward the lake. For one brief moment, she imagined Tendo standing beside a drafting table in his studio, refusing to beg her to choose him. Her chest tightened. The officiant turned toward Kato. Kato, are you prepared to make your vow? Silence. Kato looked at Nabirye. Then he looked toward their families. Florence leaned forward slightly. Kato? Nabirye whispered. He took a slow breath. No. The word was quiet, but the entire room changed. A murmur moved through the guests. Florence rose halfway from her chair. What did he say? Kato raised one hand. Please. The room settled reluctantly. Nabirye stared at him. Her first emotion was not relief. It was humiliation. Coach, she said under her breath. What are you doing? Something I should have done earlier. Her face hardened. Not here. If I wait until after this ceremony, it becomes too late. The officiant stepped back. Kato turned toward Nabirye fully. I cannot marry you. The words felt sharper the second time. A camera lowered somewhere among the guests. Florence stood. This is unacceptable. Kato did not raise his voice. Mrs. Achen, please sit down. Do not tell me to sit down while you embarrass my daughter. Nabirye turned quickly. Mother. Florence stopped. Nabirye looked back at Kato. If you're ending this, tell me why. He held her gaze. Because your yes was never freely given. The room became silent again. Nabirye swallowed. Kato continued. You agreed to this marriage because you believed your family home would be lost if you refused. Florence's expression changed. Kato, this is a private financial matter. It stopped being private when Nabirye's future became part of the financing. Gasps moved through the front rows. Nabirye's cheeks burned. Do not make me a victim in front of everyone, she said sharply. I'm not, if you like it. Kato nodded. You're right, his voice softened, and I am sorry. That apology changed the tone. Kosoto turned away from the guests and spoke only to her. You are not helpless, Nabirye. That is exactly the point. She watched him carefully. What did you find? The company can be restructured. Florence stepped forward. That is not guaranteed. No business plan is guaranteed. Kato looked at her. But the house does not need a marriage certificate to have a chance of surviving. Nabirye went still. What? Kato reached toward a slim folder resting on a nearby table. He did not open it. Instead, he placed it between them. Zoet completed the financial review. The core business remains viable. Two divisions are consuming cash at a rate the company cannot sustain. Florence's face tightened. Nabirye looked at her mother. You knew? Florence hesitated. Nabirye, it is more complicated than that. That isn't an answer. I knew downsizing had been suggested. A painful stillness settled over Nabirye. And you let me believe this marriage was the only way. I never said it was the only way. You didn't have to. Florence's eyes filled. Those divisions were your father's. There it was. Not greed. Not conspiracy. Grief, Nabirye understood it immediately, and somehow that made it hurt more. Florence pressed one hand against her chest. He built them from nothing. Closing them felt like erasing him. Nabirye's voice broke slightly. So you were willing to erase me instead? Florence shook her head. No, but that is what you were asking. Kato stepped back. This was no longer his conversation. Nabirye reached into the hidden pocket of her gown and removed the brass key. Florence stared at it. Daddy gave me this because he believed the home should protect the choices made inside it. Her fingers closed around the key. I spent weeks thinking protecting this house meant protecting him. She looked around the beautiful pavilion, at the flowers, the fabrics, the polished tables, the families, the expensive celebration built around a decision she had never truly wanted. Then she looked at Florence. Maybe protecting what he taught me matters more than protecting every wall he touched. Florence lowered her eyes. Nabirye turned toward Kato. You could have told me before I put on this dress. I should have. That was cruel, yes, and dramatic. A few nervous laughs escaped somewhere behind them. Kato almost smiled. Yes. Nabirye looked at him for several seconds. Then she slowly removed her engagement ring. Florence covered her mouth. Nabirye placed the ring in Kato's palm. I'm angry with you, I know, but I would have been angrier if you had let me finish those vows. Kato closed his fingers around the ring. I know that too. Nabirye turned toward the guests. She did not apologize. She did not explain further. She simply lifted the hem of her gown and stepped away from the altar. The brass key remained in her other hand. For weeks, it had felt like the weight of a house, a company, a dead father's legacy, and a mother's fear. Now it felt like what it had always been, a key. And for the first time, Nabirye understood that having a key did not mean she was required to stay inside every door her family opened for her. Nabirye Achen entered the conference room of Achen Heritage Interiors, wearing a tailored plum suit over a vivid kitenge blouse. The wedding dress was gone. So was the engagement ring. The brass key remained in her handbag. Florence sat at the opposite end of the polished table, her expression controlled but exhausted. Zawede Namutebi occupied the seat between them, surrounded by financial reports, restructuring proposals, and supplier agreements. No flowers, no wedding planners, just numbers. Florence looked at her daughter. You could have warned me before allowing Kato to announce our private affairs in front of everyone. Nabirye placed her handbag beside the chair. I didn't know. Florence's anger faltered. You truly didn't? No. For a moment, they were simply mother and daughter again. Then Nabirye sat down. But I'm glad the wedding stopped. Florence looked away. That humiliation will follow us for years. Then let it. Her mother turned sharply. Nabirye remained calm. I almost married a man I didn't love because I believed there was no other way. I can survive people gossiping about a cancelled wedding. Florence's lips tightened. Zawede quietly closed one folder. I think we should discuss the company. Florence gave her a tired look. Apparently everyone understands my company better than I do. No, Zawede replied. But sometimes an outsider can see what grief makes expensive. Silence. Nabirye glanced at her. It was a brave sentence. Florence's face hardened. My husband built this company, and that matters, Zawede said. But the numbers cannot honor him. She turned a report toward Florence. The core design and supply operation remains profitable. Your hospitality clients are valuable. Your supplier relationships are strong. Florence said nothing. Zawed pointed to another section. The custom manufacturing division is operating far below sustainable capacity. The heritage showroom is consuming rent, staffing, utilities, and inventory costs without generating enough revenue. Solomon opened that showroom. I know. He designed the first collection himself. I know that too. Then don't speak about closing it like we are discussing an old printer. Zawed leaned back. I'm not. Her voice softened. I'm saying a business cannot be required to preserve every memory of the person who founded it. Florence looked down. Nabirye watched her mother's fingers tighten around the edge of the report. For the first time, she understood that Florence had not merely been protecting a company. She had been trying to keep her marriage from becoming past tense. Nabirye spoke gently. Mother, Florence did not look up. Daddy is not inside that showroom. Florence's eyes filled immediately. Don't. He isn't. I said don't. And he isn't inside a production line either. Florence stood. You think because you are his daughter you understand what I lost? No. Nabia's voice remained steady. I lost my father. You lost your husband. Those are different losses. Florence stared at her. But neither of us gets to turn that loss into somebody else's debt. The words settled heavily. Zawede remained silent. Florence slowly returned to her chair. What happens if we close them? Zawede reopened the restructuring proposal. The manufacturing operation becomes smaller and made to order. We retain the strongest craftspeople and integrate some employees into the hospitality supply business. And the showroom? We leave the expensive location. Florence looked almost offended. And Solomon's collection? Nabirye answered. We archived the best pieces. Florence looked at her. We photographed them properly. Document the craftsmen. Record Daddy's design history. Build a digital collection instead of paying for a showroom we cannot afford. Zawed nodded. That would preserve the heritage without preserving the overhead. Florence remained quiet. And the house? She finally asked. Zawede turned another document around. If the restructuring works as projected, non-essential equipment is sold, and the bank accepts the revised repayment schedule, the Moyenga property has a realistic path out of immediate danger. Florence closed her eyes. So Nabirye never needed to marry Kato. Zawed chose her words carefully. The marriage was never a financial requirement. Florence's face crumbled slightly. Nabirye felt anger rise again, but this time she did not feed it. Her mother already understood what she had done. I thought I was protecting everything your father gave us, Florence whispered. Nabirye reached into her handbag. She placed the brass key on the table. Florence stared at it. You were trying to save too many things at once, and I nearly lost you. Yes. Florence looked up, tears gathering. I am sorry. Nabirye did not immediately say she forgave her. Some apologies deserved respect without being rushed into absolution. I believe you, she said. Florence nodded slowly. It was enough for now. Zawedi pushed the restructuring documents toward them. There is one more thing both of you should understand. They looked at her. This plan does not guarantee success. Florence almost smiled bitterly. Finally, something reassuring. Zawed smiled faintly. It requires discipline, smaller offices, fewer prestige expenses. No borrowing simply to protect appearances. Florence glanced at Nabirye. No more pretending. No more pretending, Nabirye agreed. Weeks of tension seemed to leave Florence's shoulders. She touched the brass key. Your father would hate seeing the showroom close. Nabirye smiled softly. He hated paying unnecessary bills more. Florence laughed through her tears. That is true. For the first time since the crisis began, they laughed together. Not because everything had been repaired. It had not. Employees still had to be reassigned. Assets still had to be sold. The bank still had to approve the revised arrangement. Trust between mother and daughter would require more than one conversation. But they were finally solving the problem that actually existed, instead of sacrificing Nabirye to avoid facing it. As the meeting ended, Florence pushed the brass key back toward her daughter. Keep it. Nabirye looked at it. I don't know if I want the house. Florence seemed surprised. You fought so hard for it. No, Nabirye picked up the key. I fought because I thought losing the house meant losing Daddy. She slipped it into her handbag. Now I know better. Outside the conference room, employees moved through the bright modern offices, carrying fabric samples, answering clients, discussing orders, doing the ordinary work that had always mattered more than the family mythology surrounding the company. Nabirye watched them. Saving something, she realized, did not always mean keeping it exactly as it had been. Sometimes saving the right thing required having the courage to let the wrong things end. At 5 p.m., Nabirye Achen stood beside the floor-to-ceiling window of her new apartment, watching warm lights settle across Kampala. The apartment was smaller than the Muyenga villa, much smaller. There was no sweeping staircase, no landscaped courtyard, and no collection of expensive furniture accumulated across decades. Instead, the space held pieces Nabirye had chosen herself. A rust-colored sofa, locally woven cushions, a sculptural wooden coffee table, vibrant Ugandan artwork, and a row of plants beside the balcony doors. On a narrow shelf near the entrance rested the old brass key. It no longer opened the door to where she lived. She liked that. Her phone rang. "Mother?" Florence's voice came through immediately. The bank confirmed the revised arrangement. Nabirye smiled. "So the house is safe? For now. For now is enough." Florence laughed softly. "You sound like Zawed. That might be the nicest thing you've said about me." Do not become impossible. Too late. Their relationship had not returned to what it had been. Nabirye did not want it to. Something more honest had replaced it. Florence had closed the heritage showroom. The manufacturing division had become a smaller made-to-order workshop, while several employees had moved into hospitality projects through new commercial partnerships. Achen Heritage Interiors was smaller, but healthier. And Florence had stopped introducing every difficult business decision with the words your father would have wanted. Before ending the call, Florence became quiet. "Are you happy there?" Nabirye looked around the apartment. "Yes, you could come home." I know, another pause. "But you're not going to." "No." Florence sighed, though without resentment. "Then at least buy a proper dining table." Nabirye laughed. "Goodbye, mother." She ended the call and picked up her handbag. She had somewhere to be. A boutique hotel project in Kampala had hired Nabirye to redesign several guest spaces using locally produced furniture and contemporary East African textiles. It was the kind of commission she had once dreamed of receiving independently. There was one complication. The landscape architect was Tendo Mugerwa. When Nabirye entered the hotel's unfinished courtyard, Tondo was examining a row of newly planted trees. He turned. For a moment, neither moved. He looked almost exactly as she remembered. Rolled sleeves, dark trousers, measuring tape clipped to his belt. Nabirye Tendo, his eyes moved over her burgundy dress and patterned jacket. "You look well." "I am. Good." She smiled slightly. That sounded painfully professional. "I'm trying not to be thrown off a project before we start. You always were cautious around demanding clients." "You were the demanding client. I was the architect." "Exactly." They both laughed. The tension softened. Tendo walked beside her through the courtyard. "I heard about the company. Kampala has ears. Kampala has aunties. That too." He hesitated. "And the house still standing. You sound less excited about that than I expected." Nabirye looked toward the young trees. "I finally understood something." Tendo waited. "I thought saving the house meant saving my father." She paused. "But memories don't need mortgages." Tendo smiled faintly. "That sounds expensive to learn." It was. They reached a shaded seating area. Tendo leaned against the edge of a stone planter. "And Kato? We're not secretly in love, if that's what you're asking." "I wasn't." "You were." "I was being mature." "You were being obvious." He laughed. Nabirye continued. "Kato and I are fine. His company is still considering projects with Achen Heritage, but everything is being negotiated commercially, as it should be." "Yes." Silence returned. This one felt different. Nabirye looked at Tento. "I owe you an apology." Not properly." He waited. "You tried to tell me that my family's emergencies could not become the architecture of our relationship." Tendo looked down briefly. "I could have said some things more gently." "Maybe. But you were right. I'm not sure hearing that feels as satisfying as I imagined." "It shouldn't." He smiled. Nabirye took a breath. "I learned the difference between loving my family and surrendering my life to them." Estendo's expression changed. There was warmth there, but also caution. "Good," she thought. She did not want another man rushing in to rescue her, simply because the previous crisis had ended. "So what happens now?" he asked. "With the project?" "With us." Nabirye smiled. "I don't know. That is surprisingly honest." "I'm practicing." Tendo considered her for a moment. "Coffee?" She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerously like a date." "It could also be two professionals discussing drainage." "That sounds worse." "Coffee then?" Nabirye laughed. "Yes." No dramatic embrace followed. No promise that love would repair everything. They simply walked through the unfinished courtyard together, discussing plants, furniture, drainage. and the possibility that two people who had loved each other once might learn how to choose each other differently. Later, Nabirye returned to her apartment and stopped beside the shelf near the entrance. She picked up the brass key. For most of her life, it had represented belonging, then responsibility, then fear. Now it represented something simpler: choice. Her father had built a beautiful house. Florence had fought desperately to preserve it. Kato had refused to let Nabi become its prize. Tendo had refused to compete with it. And Nabirye had finally learned that a woman could love the home she came from without allowing it to determine where she must remain. She returned the key to the shelf and looked around the smaller apartment she had chosen with her own money. There were still unfinished walls in her life, relationships that needed rebuilding, trust that required patience, a business career still growing one project at a time. Nothing was perfect, but for the first time, perfection was no longer the goal. Freedom was. And Nabirye finally understood that the safest home she could ever build was a life in which her own voice was allowed to hold the key. Nabirye's life no longer looked like the future her family had once planned for her, and that became the very reason she loved it. Her interior design practice secured several respected hospitality projects in Kampala, allowing her to hire two experienced designers and collaborate with independent Ugandan craftspeople. Tendo remained in her life, but neither of them rushed to replace their old relationship with promises they had not yet earned. They dated again slowly, learning to discuss money, family boundaries, ambition, and fear before discussing marriage. Florence changed too. Achen Heritage Interiors became smaller but financially healthier, and she began openly acknowledging the decisions that had nearly cost her both the company and her daughter. Kato remained a trusted professional acquaintance, never turning his decision at the altar into a claim on Nabirye's gratitude. One evening, Florence visited Nabirye's apartment carrying a small framed photograph of Solomon. "Your father would have liked this place," she said. Nabirye smiled. "Even without the grand staircase, especially without the bank owning half of it." They laughed. Beside the photograph sat the old brass key. Nabirye no longer needed it to remember where she came from. She finally knew that home was not simply what a family preserved. Sometimes, home was what a woman freely chose to build next. Nabirye's story reveals something deeper than the danger of an arranged marriage. Love becomes unhealthy when sacrifice is treated as proof of loyalty. Families can love us sincerely and still ask too much from us. Parents can make mistakes without becoming villains. A person can act from grief, fear, or desperation and still cause real harm. Understanding why someone pressures us does not require accepting the pressure. There is also an important financial lesson. Preserving an inheritance, family business, house, or reputation at any cost is not always responsible. Sometimes we continue paying for things because abandoning them feels like admitting that someone we loved is truly gone. But memory and money should not be confused. A legacy survives through values, relationships, skills, and wisdom, not merely through buildings or businesses kept alive beyond reason. Perhaps the most valuable change in Nabirye was that she stopped asking, "How much must I sacrifice to prove I love them?" She began asking a healthier question: "How can I love them without abandoning myself?" That distinction matters. A boundary is not necessarily rejection. Saying no does not automatically mean selfishness. And choosing yourself does not mean you love your family less. Sometimes the most mature form of love is refusing to let fear make decisions that everyone will later regret. If Nabirye's choice made you think differently about family, love, and sacrifice, share your perspective below. Tell us which city you are watching from, and subscribe for more meaningful African stories.